Millionaire thought he was marrying a disabled bride, but he was shocked when she stood up. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The grand wedding hall was dressed in silver chandeliers and walls of white roses. Journalists and photographers pressed against the velvet ropes, their flashes popping like a storm of lightning. Everyone turned as the groom arrived, a tall man in a tailored black suit that shimmered under the lights. He was a millionaire, heir to a vast empire. His name whispered with both envy and fear in business circles. But tonight, he was not stepping into a boardroom battle. Tonight, he was stepping into marriage, and the whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. Why her? Why would he marry a disabled bride? The cameras swung toward the young woman waiting at the altar. She sat in a wheelchair, her ivory gown draped like a waterfall across the polished floor. Her face was calm, her back straight, her eyes meeting the world with quiet defiance. There was no tremble in her hands as she gripped the bouquet, no sign of weakness in the way she tilted her chin. Some guests smiled politely, others sneered behind raised champagne flutes. They could not understand. Why would a man with so much power, wealth, and prestige marry someone who appeared so fragile, so broken? The groom's jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable as he approached her. He did not offer his hand. Instead, he nodded stiffly to the priest, as if this entire event were nothing more than a corporate transaction. But the truth hidden deep beneath the surface was far more complicated. For him, this marriage was not born of love. It was an arrangement, a contract inked under the pressure of his family's iron expectations. To secure his inheritance, to silence his critics, he needed a wife. And she, the quiet artist from a modest background, had agreed to play the role. Her condition, the wheelchair, the rumors surrounding her supposed disability, it all suited the narrative his family required. To the world, she would appear vulnerable, dependent. No one would suspect that she carried secrets of her own. As the priest began to speak, the groom felt the weight of dozens of lenses aimed at him, waiting to capture a flicker of emotion. He gave them none. His face was a mask carved from stone. She, however, allowed herself the faintest smile. It was not the smile of a timid bride, nor the forced grin of someone bought and silenced. It was the smile of a woman who knew more than she revealed, who held a truth no one else could imagine. In that moment, with the crowd murmuring and the cameras flashing, their story began not as lovers, not as equals, but as strangers bound by a paper contract and a shared facade. And yet, hidden beneath the veil of this arrangement, destiny was quietly shifting. Neither of them knew it yet, but the vows spoken that day would not be the end of their story. They would be the spark that lit a fire neither contract nor lie could contain. Because in this marriage built on deception, the most shocking truth was waiting to be revealed, and it would shatter every assumption, every prejudice, and every heart in the room. The story of that wedding was only the surface. To understand why, a powerful millionaire and a modest young woman ended up standing at the same altar, we must return to the weeks before that day. The groom, Alexander Grant, had been raised in a world of marble mansions, private jets, and high-stakes business meetings. His father, Charles Grant, had built the family company into one of the largest real estate empires in the country. From childhood, Alexander was groomed to become the heir. Every step of his education, from elite boarding schools to Ivy League universities, was carefully chosen. Success was not an option, it was an obligation. But wealth had come with chains. His father's expectations were merciless. When Charles announced that he would not pass down control of the empire unless Alexander settled down with a suitable wife, the pressure became unbearable. Suitors from wealthy families paraded before him, women polished and perfect, each promising to strengthen the Grant legacy. Alexander felt suffocated by their rehearsed smiles and shallow charm. At the same time, far from that glittering world, Emily Hayes lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. She was an artist, scraping together a living by teaching children's classes at a community center and selling hand-painted canvases at street fairs. Her life was modest, even difficult, but it was honest. She poured her soul into her sketchbooks, capturing the world in lines and colors that few stopped to notice. Emily carried a burden of her own. A car accident years earlier had left her injured, and though she had regained her ability to walk, the scars and trauma remained. Rumors spread that she was permanently disabled. In a society quick to judge by appearances, those whispers stuck to her like shadows. Yet she did not correct them. She found safety in being underestimated, in being seen as fragile. Fate crossed their paths, not at a ball or a gala, but in a hospital corridor. Emily had been visiting a child from her art class who was recovering from surgery. Alexander was there on business, donating funds for a new wing in his company's name. He noticed her kindness with the children, the way her presence lifted their spirits. For a moment, he felt a tug of something real, something unpolished and genuine. But their connection was not built on romance. It was built on necessity. When Alexander's father demanded a bride to complete the image of a stable family, Alexander remembered the quiet woman in the wheelchair. Emily was different. She was not from a rival dynasty. She was not a threat to the company's power struggles. To his father, she would look weak, manageable, a perfect choice to fit the mold of a safe wife. For Emily, the proposal came like a storm she could not escape. The offer was blunt. Marry Alexander under strict conditions, live in luxury for 1 year, then quietly separate. In return, she would have financial stability, enough to pay her medical bills, support her art, and secure a better life. Refusing meant returning to endless struggles. Accepting meant surrendering her pride and playing the role of the disabled bride. She signed the contract with trembling hands. The rules were clear. She was to maintain the image of being bound to the wheelchair at all times. He, in turn, would provide for her needs, but keep his distance. No love, no intimacy, no crossing boundaries. Just 1 year of performance. On paper, it was simple. But life is never lived on paper. Beneath Alexander's cold exterior, a storm was brewing. He despised the deal even as he forced himself to follow it. And beneath Emily's calm smile, her heart ached with shame and fear. She had traded her truth for survival, her dignity for security. The stage was set. 2 lives bound by duty, deception, and desperation. Neither of them could imagine how quickly those rules would begin to crumble once they stepped into the same house, under the same roof, pretending to be husband and wife. And as the world believed the story of a millionaire marrying a fragile, disabled bride, the truth waited patiently in the shadows, ready to burst into the light. The ink on the contract had barely dried when Emily moved into the Grant mansion. The estate loomed like a fortress of glass and stone, perched on acres of manicured land. Every corridor echoed with silence. Every marble floor reflected a cold perfection. Servants bowed as she passed, their eyes filled with curiosity and judgment. To them, she was not a wife. She was a mystery, a rumor wrapped in satin. Alexander set the rules immediately. His voice was clipped, his tone devoid of warmth. We keep appearances. Publicly, you are my wife. Privately, you stay out of my way. You will not enter my study. You will not interfere with my business. And you will not attempt to change the terms of our arrangement. Emily nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she sat in her wheelchair. Outwardly, she appeared obedient. Inwardly, she was trembling. This was her new life, and every detail felt like a performance. The contract outlined boundaries as clear as prison bars. She would play the role of a devoted but fragile bride. He would play the role of a husband who tolerated her presence for the sake of duty. The arrangement was meant to be seamless, untouchable by gossip, but reality was not so neat. Each day, small moments revealed the cracks in their facade. At breakfast, Alexander would glance at her untouched plate. She preferred sketching quietly to eating lavish meals. At night, she would hear him pacing his study, restless even in his victories. The mansion, filled with wealth, was hollow with unspoken words. One evening, Emily left her sketchbook open on the table. She had drawn a scene of children laughing in a park, vibrant with motion and joy. Alexander's eyes fell on the page. He lingered for longer than he intended, tracing the energy in the lines. "Strange," he muttered. "For someone who spends her life in a chair, you capture movement with such conviction." Emily's heart skipped, but she quickly forced a smile. Art is imagination. It does not require strength of the body. only the eye of the soul. She shut the sketchbook before he could look deeper. It was the first slip, the first sign that her secret might not remain hidden forever. Despite the walls between them, public appearances forced them into proximity. Together they attended charity dinners, business galas, and family gatherings. Cameras flashed, capturing the image of a powerful man and his delicate wife. Emily performed her role flawlessly. Her hands folded gracefully on her lap, her gaze serene. Yet behind every smile, she felt the sting of whispers. She must be a burden. He only married her for sympathy. What a tragic arrangement. Alexander heard them too. Once, at a gala, a rival executive leaned close and sneered, "A wife in a wheelchair? That is the legacy you will present to your shareholders?" The insult was meant to sting, and it did. But what surprised Alexander was not the words, it was the anger that flared in him. He found himself standing taller, his voice sharp. "My wife is worth more than your entire fortune," he snapped before turning away. The words startled even him. They had not been rehearsed, they had come from instinct, Emily noticed. In her chest, a flicker of warmth battled against her guilt. She wanted to thank him, but she swallowed the words. Gratitude felt dangerous. Attachment felt reckless. The contract had warned them. No love, no intimacy, no blurred lines. Yet life had a way of eroding walls, stone by stone. The more Alexander defended her, the more she feared he might one day uncover the truth. And the truth was a ticking clock waiting to explode. For now, she clung to the safety of her chair, to the boundaries written in ink. But as the nights grew longer and the silences between them heavier, she wondered how much longer she could pretend. Because Alexander was watching her more closely with each passing day, and Emily knew that one slip, one unguarded moment, could destroy the fragile balance of their contract forever. The days in the Grant mansion stretched into weeks, and with each sunrise the contract between Alexander and Emily grew heavier. Outwardly, they played their roles with flawless precision. Inwardly, both felt the tension tightening like a rope pulled to the breaking point. It was in the smallest details that cracks began to show. Emily, despite her supposed frailty, moved through the house with surprising ease. Her arms showed subtle strength from years of painting and carrying supplies. When she lifted her teacup, her fingers were steady, her grip confident. Alexander noticed. He noticed everything. One morning, the mansion's staff prepared an elaborate breakfast. Alexander sat at the head of the long oak table, reading financial reports. Emily rolled in quietly, her wheelchair wheels whispering against the marble floor. She reached for a basket of bread on the far side of the table, and without thinking, she stood halfway to stretch her arm before quickly collapsing back into the chair. Her heart raced. She prayed he had not seen, but he had. His eyes flicked up, sharp and unyielding, before lowering again to his papers. He said nothing, yet the silence carried weight heavier than any accusation. That evening, she found her sketchbook on his desk. He had flipped it open to a page where she had drawn dancers spinning across a stage, their legs strong, their movements alive. His voice was low when she entered. "For a woman who cannot walk, you draw motion as if you have lived it yourself." Emily froze. She wanted to explain, to tell him that art was imagination, that the body remembers what the heart once knew. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she gathered the sketchbook with trembling hands and whispered, "Please, do not touch my work again." The tension did not fade. It grew. Public appearances only fueled the strain. At a charity event in the city, Emily accompanied Alexander, her gown flowing like silver fire under the chandeliers. She sat gracefully in her chair, answering polite questions from curious guests. But across the ballroom, she felt eyes burning into her. It was Isabella Moore, Alexander's former fiancée, a woman from a powerful family who had been rejected when Alexander refused his father's arrangement. Isabella approached with a smile as sharp as glass. "Emily, is it? You are quite the mystery. Tell me, does Alexander find it romantic to wheel you around like a fragile porcelain doll?" The words were sugar on the surface, venom underneath. Emily held her composure, her voice calm. "Romance is not measured by appearances. Perhaps you have yet to learn that." The exchange did not go unnoticed. Alexander stepped closer, his hand firm on Emily's shoulder as he glared at Isabella. "Enough. My wife deserves respect." His words cut through the room, silencing whispers. For the second time, Alexander defended her not out of obligation, but out of something deeper, something he had not yet named. That night, as their car rolled back to the mansion, silence filled the space between them. Finally, Alexander spoke, his tone laced with suspicion. "Tell me, Emily, who are you, really? Because I am beginning to think you are not the woman you pretend to be." Her pulse thundered in her ears. She forced her gaze to the window, the city lights streaking past like falling stars. "I am exactly who the contract says I am," she answered softly. But Alexander did not believe her. His instincts screamed otherwise. In her private chamber, Emily sank into bed, her mind replaying the evening. Each day, the facade grew harder to maintain. Each glance from Alexander pierced deeper, as if he could see the truth waiting beneath her calm smile. The contract had promised 1 year of distance, yet every day, the walls between them shrank. And Emily feared that when those walls finally collapsed, the truth would destroy not just their agreement, but both of their lives. The rumors about their marriage only grew louder with time. Newspapers printed headlines that questioned Alexander's choice, while gossip magazines painted Emily as a charity case, a woman chosen not for love, but for pity. Every event they attended became a stage. Every camera, a reminder of the world's scrutiny. For Emily, the whispers cut like knives. She heard them even when no one spoke, echoing in the corners of the mansion. She told herself that she could endure it, that the year-long contract would eventually end, and she could return to her art in peace. But her heart was not so easily convinced. At a dinner hosted by the Grant family, the tension reached new heights. The long dining table glittered with crystal glasses and polished silverware. Alexander's relatives filled the seats, their eyes sharp with judgment. His aunt leaned forward, her voice dripping with disdain. "Tell me, Emily, how do you expect to fulfill the duties of a wife when you cannot even stand on your own 2 feet?" The words hung in the air like poison. Emily's hands trembled as she set down her fork. Before she could respond, Alexander's chair scraped against the floor. He rose to his feet, his voice cold as steel. "She is my wife. Question her again, and you question me." The room fell silent. His defense was firm, but Emily could feel the storm in his gaze. He was no longer protecting a contract. He was protecting her. Days later, the pressure shifted from whispers to open attack. Isabella, still bitter from her rejection, arranged for Emily to attend a charity fashion show in the city. Emily agreed, believing it to be another ordinary public duty. She dressed in a gown of soft lavender, her wheelchair polished to perfection, her smile as calm as ever. But Isabella had laid a trap. As Emily moved across the stage to greet donors, Isabella gave a subtle signal. A man pretending to be a waiter pushed past, striking the wheel of Emily's chair. The chair lurched violently, sending her tilting forward. Gasps filled the room as Emily clutched the arms of the chair to steady herself. Her instinct screamed to stand, to protect herself from falling. For a split second, she felt her muscles coil, ready to reveal the truth. The crowd leaned forward, eyes wide, cameras ready. But Alexander was there. In one swift motion, he caught the chair before it toppled. His hand gripped the handle with a force that shook with fury. His glare swept across the room, pinning Isabella in place. "Enough," he barked, his voice echoing. "This ends now." Emily's chest heaved as she sank back, her heart pounding. She had been seconds away from shattering the illusion, from exposing everything. The danger of her secret pressed heavier than ever. As the guests whispered, Alexander leaned down, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Who are you protecting with this act, Emily? Yourself or me?" She could not answer. Her throat closed, her eyes burned. She only knew that the line between truth and lies was thinning, and soon, one reckless moment would change everything. That night, alone in her chamber, Emily pressed her hands against her face and wept. She was trapped in a web of deception and public scorn, held together only by Alexander's growing instinct to shield her. But how long could she keep her secret, when the world and the man beside her were both closing in? The charity fashion show was supposed to be just another public event, another chance for Alexander and Emily to maintain the image of a perfect marriage. Instead, it became the beginning of the storm. In the days after, videos of the incident spread quickly online. Clips of Emily's chair nearly tipping, her arms straining to hold balance, were replayed again and again. Commentators paused the footage frame by frame, analyzing every movement. Some insisted she had almost stood. Others accused her of faking her disability from the very beginning. The headlines were brutal. The millionaire's wife, a fraud in disguise? Every news anchor seemed to echo the same question. Was Emily lying to the world? Inside the Grant mansion, the atmosphere grew heavier than ever. Alexander paced the study late into the night, anger radiating from him like fire. Emily could hear his footsteps through the walls, each one pounding against her chest. She sat alone in her chamber, the curtains drawn, her sketchbook untouched. One evening, Alexander stormed into her room. His eyes were sharp, his voice hard. "Tell me the truth, Emily. Can you walk?" Her hands tightened around the armrests of her chair. For a moment she thought of denying it, of weaving one more lie to protect herself. But the intensity in his gaze burned through every shield she had. Tears stung her eyes. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, I can walk." The silence that followed was unbearable. Alexander's jaw clenched, his fists curled at his sides. "You lied to me. You lied to everyone. Why?" Her breath shook as she tried to explain. "Because your world would never have accepted me as I am. A poor artist with nothing to offer but my hands and my heart. They would have torn me apart. They already did when they thought I was weak. At least in this chair, I was untouchable." But her confession did not soothe him. His voice cut like ice. "You think deception is protection? You think lies are strength? You have humiliated me, my family, and everything I have worked for." Emily sobbed, her body trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted a chance to survive." Alexander turned away, his shoulders rigid. The man who had defended her in public, who had shielded her from every cruel whisper, now looked at her as though she were a stranger. Without another word, he walked out, leaving her alone in the silence of her shattered secret. That night, Emily sat by the window, staring at the moonlight spilling across the garden. She felt hollow, emptied of everything but regret. The lie that had once been her shield had now become the weapon that destroyed the fragile bond between them. The contract had promised them distance, but it was no longer distance that separated them. It was betrayal. And Emily knew that from this moment forward, nothing would ever be the same. Because the truth was no longer hers to carry. It was out in the world, waiting to burn everything down. The night after her confession stretched endlessly. Emily sat awake in her chamber, her face pale from tears, her heart pounding with dread. She had revealed her secret, and in doing so, she had destroyed the fragile truce between them. By morning, the scandal had broken wide open. The media exploded with headlines. "The millionaire's wife walks deception uncovered." Paparazzi swarmed the gates of the Grant mansion, shouting questions and flashing cameras at every passing car. Protesters gathered outside, holding signs that accused her of fraud, of marrying Alexander for wealth under false pretenses. Inside the mansion, the walls felt smaller and colder. Alexander did not come to her. He stayed locked in his study, answering endless calls from board members, lawyers, and public relations teams. Every conversation was laced with anger. Every voice demanded explanations. His company's stock value trembled under the weight of the scandal. Finally, late that evening, Alexander appeared at her door. His face was hard, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Do you understand what you have done?" he demanded. Emily's voice cracked as she whispered, "I only wanted to survive." "Oh, survive?" His voice rose, filled with fury. "You have turned me into a fool before the entire world. My name, my family, my business, everything is drowning because of your lie." Tears slid down her cheeks, but she did not look away. "And what about me, Alexander? Do you think your world would ever have let me in, if I had come as myself? Do you think your father would have allowed you to marry a poor artist with nothing to her name? I lied because your world left me no choice." The words hung between them, raw and aching. For the first time, Alexander saw not just the deception, but the desperation behind it. Still, his pride was wounded too deeply to offer forgiveness. "I cannot look at you without seeing betrayal," he said coldly. "From this moment forward, stay out of my life. We may share this roof, but we will never share anything else." He turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing in the wreckage of her heart. That night, Emily wept until she could not breathe. The mansion felt like a prison, its grandeur mocking her loneliness. Outside, the world demanded her downfall. Inside, the man she had begun to love had cast her aside. It was the breaking point. The marriage that had begun as a contract was now shattered by truth. And though Emily's secret was finally revealed, it had cost her the only bond she had ever dared to hope for. Emily did not leave the mansion after that confrontation, but she no longer felt like a wife. She lived as a shadow in the house, avoiding the study where Alexander buried himself in endless work. The staff looked at her with pity or suspicion, their whispers trailing behind her as she moved down the halls. Still, she refused to collapse. If her truth had ruined her marriage, she would not let it ruin her spirit. Every morning she rose before dawn, setting up her easel in the sunlit conservatory. She painted for hours, pouring her heartbreak into colors that spoke what her lips could not say. Children running, women standing tall, figures breaking free from chains, the canvases became her confession, her rebellion, and her hope. Meanwhile, Alexander fought battles of his own. The board of directors threatened to remove him as the company's future leader. Investors demanded he divorce her to salvage his image. Even his father, Charles Grant, cornered him with cruel words. "You tied our family name to a liar. End this farce, or you lose everything." For the first time in his life, Alexander began to question what everything truly meant. He thought of Emily's quiet strength, the fire he had glimpsed in her art, the way she had stood up to his world with nothing but truth and trembling hands. And he realized that the empire he had been raised to inherit felt emptier than the silence between them. One evening, he entered the conservatory unannounced. Emily stood at the canvas, her hands streaked with paint, her face streaked with tears she had not noticed falling. He watched her for a long moment before speaking. "You should not have lied. But I was blind too, blind to the cruelty of the walls I let surround us." Emily turned, startled. Her voice was hoarse. "What do you want from me now, Alexander?" "You said we were finished." He stepped closer, his expression softer than it had been in weeks. "What I want is justice. Justice for you and for us. I will not let them destroy you for a lie that was born of survival. If they want to take everything from me because I stand by you, then let them. I will not betray you as I once did." Emily's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she saw not the cold air, not the man of contracts and rules, but someone willing to fight for more than money and pride. The storm outside had not quieted, but inside that room, the first fragile thread of redemption had been woven. And though trust would take time, Alexander's vow planted a seed of hope in Emily's heart. For the first time since the wedding, she dared to believe that their story was not over. It was only beginning. The boardroom showdown came only a week later. Alexander stood tall at the head of the long mahogany table, facing directors, investors, and his father. The air was thick with accusation. Charles Grant's voice thundered first. "If you wish to keep this company, you will divorce her. That woman has shamed us. She has ruined our reputation." But Alexander's voice was steady, cutting through the storm. "What ruins a legacy is not a woman's struggle for survival. What ruins a legacy is cowardice and cruelty. Emily is my wife, and I will not abandon her." Gasps rippled across the room. Investors shifted uncomfortably. Directors exchanged tense glances. But Alexander did not falter. For the first time, he was not echoing his father's commands, nor bowing to public pressure. He was standing on his own, and he was standing for her. That evening, the news spread like wildfire. Cameras captured Alexander leaving the building with Emily by his side, her hand in his. For the first time, he did not hide her, did not shield her as if she were fragile. He walked proudly, his voice firm as he told reporters, "She is not my weakness. She is my strength." The world was stunned. The same headlines that once mocked now shifted. The millionaire who chose love over power. Back at the mansion, Emily returned to her studio. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows as she painted, her brush moving with new freedom. Alexander entered quietly, his hand brushing her shoulder. She looked up, her eyes shining with both uncertainty and hope. He spoke softly. We began with lies, but I want us to end with truth. No contracts, no conditions, only us. Tears welled in her eyes as she set down her brush. For the first time since that fateful wedding day, she felt the weight of deception lift from her chest. Then let us begin again, she whispered. Alexander leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. Emily Hayes Grant, you are my choice. Not my father's, not society's, not the board's. Mine. Outside, the garden bloomed as spring spread its warmth across the estate. The old wheelchair sat abandoned in a corner of the conservatory, no longer needed, no longer her shield. It stood as a symbol of the walls they had broken, the prejudices they had defeated. Hand in hand, Alexander and Emily stepped into the sunlight, not as a couple bound by a contract, but as two souls bound by truth, justice, and love. Their story had begun with deception, but it ended with a promise that love, when chosen with courage, could outshine every lie and silence every doubt.